and are very much a part of, they're half the population, and whether we are improved or not will affect everybody, and that goes for everybody, regardless of sex, ethnicity, whatever. Those who were in power at the time, who made decisions on behalf of all the people at that time, were men. And they decided that women did not have the disposition or the sensibilities to attend institutions of higher education. Well, now, equal pay and equal rights amendment are still errant. All levels of education in general are now reconciled, available to everyone, irrespective of sex. In this Reconciling Ministry series that I've been doing over the last 4 weeks, first we defined reconciliation and discovered that we are defined by reconciliation. Matthew 5, but I say to you, if you are angry with a brother or sister, if you insult a brother or sister, if you say, you're crazy, you fool, you will be liable to the hell of fire. So when you are offering your gift at the altar, if you remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift before the altar and go first to be reconciled to your brother and sister, and then come to offer your gift. It's pretty clear. We learned that reconciliation happens in the context of covenant, and covenanting presupposes reconciliation. We are Christ's agents. God speaks through us. God trusts you with God's message, helps us to convince others to stop fighting and be friends. We speak for Christ, who begs you, be at peace with God and with each other. Be reconciled with one another. You speak for God. You speak on behalf of Jesus to show people how to be friends. And we do that by being friends with one another. How to stop fighting, how to be kind, show them how to be kind again, because we made a covenant with one another to be in right relationship with each other. So that was the second week. We made this covenant together as we come together as United Methodists, when we become members, when we baptize people, when we remember our baptism. We made this covenant to be in right relationship with each other. We also learn that reconciliation happens in the sacrament of communion and is made possible by that which is symbolized in the eating and the drinking, in the remembering. It is holy. It is sacred. Reconciled in one body through the cross, putting to death the hostility between people groups, between the Jewish law and ultimate grace, true love. Ephesians 2. In him, the whole structure is joined together and grows into a holy temple in the Lord, Patulus, if you remember, in whom you also are built together spiritually into a dwelling place for God. We are this dwelling place for God. We grow these Patulus leaves and fruit for all to see and enjoy together. And now, we must come to the conclusion that it does not happen on its own, aside from the ultimate reconciliatory act of Jesus very being what Jesus did. Jesus did that. But we are responsible to be active in this. It is active. It is perpetual. It is a choice to reconcile with one another. It is a freedom we have to be reconciled to God and to each other. It is vulnerable, and it can be frightening. Still, within reconciliation, we find that we cannot live within that bond, not free. The mask. We can't live with that mask any longer, pretending something that we're not. And that reminds me of a quote that was actually the week before we started this series from James Baldwin. Love takes off the masks that we fear we cannot live without and know that we cannot live within. was shown when we attempt to create our own molds or form someone else's vessel. When we try to put that on somebody else, tell them how they ought to be, that cistern, that vessel becomes cracked and it won't hold water. God shows Jeremiah another truth in today's reading, that God made the clay itself. And God can refashion, recreate that vessel. So love, this ultimate love, Jesus' life, death, and resurrection, altered the physics of the human body that created vessel that we have. Jesus' act made it possible for God to recreate us, reconcile us to what God intended for us. So here's another great word for today. I'm just going to start giving you new words, mostly because I love learning new words. Deracinate. Does anyone know what that means? Deracinate. Tom, do you know? It means to uproot, to take something from its native environment, like from your home country or weeds from the garden. I was telling Clark about this word when I came across it, and he said, "Yeah, Mom, you deracinated me from Aurora." Dude. So there's another use of deracinate. Now he knows it too. Thank the Lord. Bob and Ken this week deracinated the weed jungle around the tree in our backyard. And it is awesome. It's totally clear because it was looking really scary. Again, though, I am grateful for my son Lysander, who appreciates that and sees the beauty in it, and was really sad actually that all the weeds were gone. I don't sometimes understand him, but I am grateful for his way of seeing the world. Onesimus was deracinated from his home. He was sold into slavery, or however he came into slavery, he was no longer part of his family home. At some point, Onesimus runs away from Philemon. Philemon is how I grew up saying it, so I'll probably keep saying it that way, but to make his own way as a free man. Philemon had every right under the law to have Onesimus imprisoned or even executed, really, at the time. But Paul asks Philemon to forgive Onesimus and go even further to welcome him back, not as a slave, but as a full member of the family. Absolutely unheard of at that time. It would have been a scandal, even, to do that. But Paul says, everything has been changed because of Jesus. Paul asks Philemon to be reconciled with Onesimus, to be an example of the reconciling action of God in our world, to actively live out that reconciling act and being that marks us as followers of Christ, to live in the power, in the love that empowers us, enables us, recreates that right relationship between each other and between us and God. So we read today, Kelly read so beautifully, in Colossians 1, "For in him, Jesus, all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell." And I love that it says pleased to dwell. It was God's joy to do this. And through him, God was pleased to reconcile all things, everything, to himself, to God's self, whether on earth or in heaven, by making peace through the blood of his cross. And you who were once estranged and hostile in mind, doing evil deeds, he is now reconciled in his fleshly body through death, so as to present you holy and blameless and irreproachable before God. Jesus reconciled our minds and our hearts, inclined to do the things in other ways than how we were made. That is, to be in right relationship with God and one another. That's how we were created, to be in right relationship with each other. Jesus reconciled our contrary way of living and being in his own flesh, his very own body, through death. And by doing so, we are blameless. That is our reality now. Still I choose to feel slighted by my husband, or pretend to have things in hand when I could easily ask for help. Putting on that darn mask I fear I cannot live without, and no, I absolutely cannot live within. Julian of Norwich, the first woman to write in English, I told you about last week, received a revelation of Jesus' action on the cross. Jesus shows her that by accepting the cross, all of creation is reconciled with the Creator, and the work is made visible by its effects. That is, the sacraments as signs of divine grace, and the compassion perfected on the cross, now enacted by the one whose soul Christ indwells, the receiver of this gift. Debate as sacrament. When we argue it out with one another, it is a sacrament. It is an action we make. People acting. It's sacred truths. Sacred truths are revealed. Holy moments are elevated in these moments when we have real conversation with one another. It is a mimicking and acting out of the Trinitarian being, a perfect flow of giver and receiver of this gift of giving and taking and stepping back and listening and talking more about how we understand one another and our perspectives. It is not an enclosed internal thing. It's not, my religion is private, or please let's not talk about politics because it might be uncomfortable. It's not an internal thing. We're indwelled by the God of the universe, the God of everything. It's intimate. But as we are issued from, born out of, continuously brought into life, never leaving ever outward from Jesus, we are nurtured and protected and live God's revelation outward. We become indwelled by Christ, externalized, we live out Jesus' mission in the world. Christ indwells while we are enclosed by God. The soul is healed while turned outward to participate in the drama of salvation. We are part of this drama of salvation, imitating his passion through acts of compassion. It's a both and it's a mystery. And we discover the beautiful aspects of this ministry every time we come together and have a conversation. The same Christ, the same God, the same Spirit, this Trinitarian creator, redeemer, sustainer, act and being, indwells and empowers us all, every one of us, to action. So there's this friend of my father-in-law, a retired professor of literature at the University of Illinois. His name is Milo Kaufman, and he writes poetry as well. And he wrote a poem, my father-in-law just shared it with me not too long ago, and it is beautiful. He wrote it about Julian of Norwich and her life, and I just found it to be quite profound, so I'm going to read some of it to you. In her cellular, so she went into a side compartment of the church, a cell, to meditate more, but also to counsel others as they came, but to continue to reflect on and listen to what Jesus was trying to tell her in the Revelations. In her cellular compartment, Julian joys to see the Lord striding through the uncreated, holding as a nut the world. So she saw the world as like a hazelnut in God's hand. It's just beautiful imagery. In another vision later, Julian sees the human lot dramatized as errant Adam, stumbling, falling. Who would not? We all fall. Sins behoovely. That's the footnote to the volume of her lore. But love is the text, as is God's pity, and love will settle every score. Tell me how a virgin woman alone, sequestered in a cell, came to grasp the boundless truth that heaven's not a room in hell. Heaven's not a room in hell. When we create the walls that divide, that define difference, separating one from another. When we say only these people who act like this or who don't act like that are eligible for heaven, we decide on everything that is not heaven. We're making the decision of what is not heaven, that is hell. And heaven becomes a room rendered uncomfortably small. I think that's what she was trying to say. Julian, deracinated from her home, from her family, enters a cell. Due to the effects of her near-death illness, embraces the solitude and uses that to read and to research and to pray and meditate and write and counsel. Reconciliation doesn't just randomly happen. It is an action, and it is active, perpetual, a choice. It's a freedom reminding us we cannot live within the bond, the mask, any longer.